I have to start by reading this out. I am obliged to inform you that this meeting is being videoed. Members of the public are entitled to record the proceedings and are requested to give prior notice so that any additional measures that may assist can be put into place. Any member of the public who has any concerns should raise them now. Right, thank you. Item 1, apologies for absence. Steve Davenport has sent his apologies. Leslie Victon's just gone charging off because her car alarm was going off, so she'll be back in a minute. Right. Item 2, disclosable pecuniary interests. Anything? If they crop up during the meeting, just shout and we'll take them on board. Item 3, minutes, pages 1 to 10. They're included in the agenda. Everyone happy with them? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Item 4, public question times. I haven't been told of any public questions. No. Item 5, member questions. Again, haven't got anything. Item 6, scrutiny items. No. So, item 7, performance report, quarter 1. Steve Chalmley.
Thank you, Leader. This is the regular report which we bring on performance. In general, it is positive. I'm sure everyone has read the details and gone through the link and seen the the detail of it. Just one thing I would like to highlight on the find it 6.2. It mentions visitor attractions, leisure centres, and outdoor rec. Just on the back of Visitor Theatre 7 last night, which we backed out to see Greg Davis. Visitor numbers are keep going up, and I would like to highlight what a fantastic facility it is. I move the report. Taking the questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Under the prosperous economy, when one looks at the data which is on the website, it shows that the satisfaction with the transport and highways has risen by 1% for the last few months, although it's 55%. Are you happy at this? Are there anything being done to actually try and improve that? It does refer to the data set which is there to be interrogated. It isn't in the words for it, but 55% isn't a very high percentage acceptance and satisfaction with the highways and transport in Shropshire Council area.
I think it's a bit unfortunate Steve Davenport's not here today.
Okay.
So, because it would be Steve I'd be sort of looking after that. George, do you want to comment on that?
I think as an officer, what I would be saying is clearly, 55% isn't 100%, Roger, and clearly that's what we would want to strive for as a target. I think what we shouldn't lose sight of is the amount of roads that we have across Shropshire, extremely rural authority, and also there is a lot of investment going into our roads at the moment, which when it affects certain parts of the community, quite rightly, people are frustrated, and that reflects some of those satisfaction levels. However, when those works are completed, those same people don't then necessarily say how satisfied they are. So I think an example is the recent improvements at Meal Roundabout, when understandably there was a lot of frustration at the time, and now that work's been completed. Informally, I hear a lot of complimentary comments about that particular roundabout, but that doesn't necessarily get reflected in the formal surveys that we undertake. But clearly there's always room for improvement, and we're clearly wanting to strive to further develop our relationships and ultimately that customer satisfaction level.
Alan?
Now George has mentioned it, it would be interesting to know if the satisfaction rates were split into different sections, and if Shrewsbury could be identified within that data, because I'm sure there would be less satisfaction with Shrewsbury than elsewhere, given the nightmare traffic circumstances that's happened at the moment. And just anecdotally, I went up to Meal Brace on at the weekend, and the roundabout was working perfectly, but I got trapped in the middle of it on the hamburger bit because of the backlog of traffic that were trying to get on the retail park. And I'm sure that people would say that that new roundabout, at this point in time, not saying it's not going to be an advantage in 10, 15 years, is doing nothing whatsoever to ease congestion in that area. And it is about time that the highways and the planners and whatever did get some serious work done on looking at access and egress from that retail park. And I saw a piece in the newspapers yesterday, was it, or the day before, saying proposals had come forward from the developers on that site, which seem totally inadequate so far as I'm concerned. I hope that something radically can be done there. But I would also say that people in Shrewsbury are a little bit bemused by what's happened on the roundabouts, which seems little more than resurfacing and just not seem to have any tangible impact on traffic movements, and maybe they weren't designed for that at this time, I don't know. But I do hope that lessons are learnt from it. And on other roadworks in the town centre, for example, Shoplight is currently closed in Shrewsbury. I think it's unfortunate that that's not being used as a potential experiment to look at ways in which the high street might be pedestrianised. I know this has been looked at in the past, and that would seem as a good example. But unfortunately, the lights were not adjusted properly. It's caused great degree of problems for traffic in the town centre, which I've brought to the attention of officers. I do wonder about more rigorous planning of these events, and also work programmes that see the works progressing quicker than they are in some of the areas. I passed the work at the.
I don't want to stop you.
No, I know I'm going on beyond the situation. But I'm just talking about one person's satisfaction with highways and transport, and I do think that for the layman's eyes, the work could be progressing much more quickly than it actually is, and the levels of congestion and confusion for motorists much reduced.
Did you want to comment on that, George, or do you want Roger to go first?
Well, it's a follow-up, Chairman, but it is Shropshire Council performance, and many people have questioned the performance of Shropshire Council during the last 6 months. There are a number of compliments about the Millbrace roundabout, but there wasn't a problem there at all. It was just signage on the road was the main problem. The main problem is up the road leading up to the A5, which has been ignored. Whether it's Shropshire Council or Highways Agency or Highways England, I don't know. But I'm wondering about, this is what the report says. I'd like if there was an update on satisfaction, because a lot of people, a lot of parishes are saying how dissatisfied they were about what was happening, and the way it was signposted, the information, the way the work was done. Now it's progressed into Shrewsbury itself, but I think the publicity about what's happening in the next few months in Shrewsbury with the improvements, or so-called improvements, I think that needs to be better publicised, and maybe sit down and actually look at it to see whether another way can be found to do it far better than what is being programmed at present. Satisfaction is not good.
Okay, to the point. You've made your point. David.
Thank you, Leader. I wasn't intending to speak. I wasn't expecting this conversation to go into detailed roadworks, and I don't spend much time on detailed roadworks, but let's just forget that there's, not forget that there's other roads other than those in Shrewsbury. You know my frustration about what hasn't been happening in Much Wenlock, but when work has been done in Much Wenlock, there has been, I won't say universal satisfaction, but people have been very pleased with the speed, the quality of the work that's been done.
We talked about the performance report, Leslie, and I know you were quite interested in some of the numbers at the theatre, which is in your area.
Yes, one of the things that I just wanted to point out to members was the increased figures at Shrewsbury Museum and Art Gallery. Although there are a couple of mitigating factors over those numbers, better recording and Easter falling where it did, there is no doubt that the numbers are well up this year, and I think the staff are to be congratulated on the efforts that they're putting in there.
Right. I don't want to be all day on this report because there are some recommendations. Everyone happy with the recommendations? Right, thank you very much. Moving on. Item 8, application by Condover Parish Council to be considered as a neighbourhood plan area.
Okay, this report's exactly as titled. It's the application by the Condover Parish Council. They want to be considered as a neighbourhood plan area. This is purely the application to be considered. We've been out to consultation on it, and as you'll see from the recommendations, we're recommending that they can go ahead. This is not to say this is the neighbourhood plan or we are adopting it. This is just purely that they can start the process of preparing a neighbourhood plan, which would still have to go out to a referendum and be agreed, but we're saying that subject to all of that happening, that we would then look to adopt it. So I think we welcome the fact that another community is coming forward and taking more of an active role in helping with their neighbourhood, and under the recommendations.
Seems pretty straightforward. Everyone happy?
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Item 9, financial monitoring, quarter 1. David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm going to be brief. The report is for the first 2 months of this year and is not to be confused with the financial strategy reports that we get from time to time. This little animal here is simply doing what it says. It is telling us what has happened in the first 3 months of this year. It is seeking to extrapolate that into what might happen in the full year, and you would have read that if nothing changed in this year, that there will be a deficit of around about £4 billion. Clearly, nobody expects that to happen because, as I say, this is purely based on the estimation that's going on in the first quarter. We'll have a much clearer picture as we move through this month and into October. Nevertheless, there are 1 or 2 areas of concern in here which have been referred to the appropriate directors. The portfolio holders are aware, and I'm sure they will be dealing with them. But it is what it is. There are a series of recommendations on page 30, A through to G, and I formally move those recommendations.
Right. Any comment, Roger?
Thank you, Chairman. It is quarter 1. I'm not going to refer to figures because they can be a little bit awry with 1 quarter. But there are some words within the document I'd like to receive some comments on. Page 35, 6.4. Further work is required within service areas to find an ongoing basis for managing and funding these pressures so that further growth is not required within the financial strategy and hence an increase in the funding gap. And then 7.1, talking about the reserves, the figure has been revised downwards, reflecting the fact that the Council has undertaken a strategy of only pursuing robust and deliverable savings proposals for the next 2 financial years and financing the remaining funding gap through the use of one-off reserves. And that comment is made in a few places about it because the financial reserves were reduced. Some of them were being used to fund one-offs because it was said in the financial strategy for this year, and I thought it should have been reflected now, that all the savings were achievable. There were no savings that were not achievable, so therefore the requirement to have such high reserves was not required. I see some of the savings, and there's the educational support grant, can refer to that which is referred in it, and I'm puzzled by some of those comments. But if we have a projecting now the red savings, especially in safeguarding, but we've got a robust saving and our reserves have been reduced because it is said that we would achieve all those savings, where are we?
Alan, comments now?
Well, it's on similar grounds to what Roger's concerned about. I know it's only at the early days, so I haven't got it too carefully, but this seems to be projecting a significant overspend against the budget of over £4 million that has got to be translated into significant cuts for services and impacting on residents at a time when, to some extent, red cuts have been sort of waved away as not particularly going to be happening, but it's quite clear that they are. And the only comment is that I hope this isn't reflecting some lack of control and expertise following the more recent regime change within the authority, and that you'll be able to assure us that this is not going to lead to the sort of draconian cuts that many people might fear as a consequence.
What I would say is I think this reflects the tail end of the previous administration, because the first quarter was in that area. All of the actions we've taken wouldn't have been reflected in that first quarter, and from here on in I can assure you there will be some robust discussions going on about the projected overspend. In fact, they've already started taking place. There may need to be some tough decisions. If they are needed, we will take the tough decisions. But other than that, I think the report's a good report, and it's quite clear. It is conservative in the way it's talking about some of the money, so it's giving more of a worst case scenario rather than a best case scenario, and I think that's a good basis to start from. So, you know, I think we should accept the report and take on board what it says, which we, as I say, we've already started doing. So, everyone happy? Right, thank you. And then I get to it. There is the next one, which is in my name, the annual Treasury report. I haven't got anything much to say about it. I don't know if James wants to say much.
No, it's just standard report.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We will be looking to try and improve the income we get from any money we invest, but it is difficult within the remits we are given by government to where we can invest money. But we will be doing things to try and make sure we get as good a return as possible on any money we invest. So yeah, that's just a matter of report really. Everyone happy?
Yep.
And then item 11 is Treasury Management Update. Same sort of thing. James, any?
No, again, it's just this is the update for the first quarter.
Yeah.
So
it is what it is.
regular report.
Right, so unless there's any comment, we'll move on. New business rates discretionary relief scheme. David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. This is the Council's response really to the money that was announced by government earlier this year to help ease the pain of being suffered by or felt by a number of businesses across not only Shropshire but across the whole country as a consequence of the revaluations. Shropshire has been awarded an amount of money and has been left to devise its own scheme. A lot of work has gone into devising the scheme that's here before you, and it's now time to go and actually consult people on these proposals. So the recommendations today are to approve the proposals for the scheme and to confirm the arrangements for consultation as set out in the report, and then confirm the delegation to the Head of Finance Governance Assurance in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance to finalise the scheme for 2017-18 following that consultation. James and I will answer any questions that members may have to the best of our ability. But it is for consultation.
Just so I'm clear,
decision.
it's a consultation, but we're delegating you the power to implement. Once the consultation is finished,
yes.
We implement the scheme.
Yes.
Yeah, no, sorry, just so
And
everyone's clear.
that's to avoid further delay, because
Yeah, no.
we're always already almost halfway through the year.
Just so everyone's
and
clear
we need
about
to
what
get
we're
this money
saying.
out to people that need
As
it.
long as there's no major hiccup in the consultation, we will be implementing the
Yes,
scheme.
yes.
Right, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to see something is happening, finally. There was a question tabled by Councillor Boddington in May, which for whatever reason wasn't really asked until June. So the council have known this £1.3 million has been there for a long time, and there are businesses there having to pay it and suffering. They're 6 months into their financial year, and they still haven't got anything. Now we're going into a hurried 2-week consultation on it. 2 weeks. Okay, it's there, but we're 6 months, 7 months, 8 months into the year before that money starts to be distributed. Any that isn't goes back to government. I can refer back to task and finish groups where we've had grants from government and we've actually had to return money because it hasn't been spent during that financial year. I note the comments to say that anything unspent has to be returned. I hope it isn't, and that there's only £12,000 available for Shropshire Council to pay for their overheads. But that money needs to be got out to the appropriate businesses ASAP. To say that we're consulting now, I think does not do the decent thing about the small businesses within Shropshire. So I hope that we can do it, and at the end of this short consultation, we can start giving out the money to the areas that it is needed.
I don't think your comments recognise the complexity of actually trying to bring in this sort of scheme, and that you can't do it overnight, and it has taken time to understand what the government intends, and I think we're intending that the money will be doled out to the appropriate people as soon as possible.
Could I add that? I think it's interesting to note that the only authority, as far as we know, in the UK so far that's distributed a grant is Coventry, and the reason for that is that there are other government grants that businesses will receive, and because we don't know what that government scheme is, if we added those to it, we could end up giving a double grant to some businesses and no grant to others. So we need to know what the government scheme is before we fill in the gap with our grant, and that's the problem. As the leader has said, we're working to distribute the money as soon as possible, and the intention is that the whole of the grant does get distributed to the right businesses as soon as we know who they are. Can I just, if I could just refer to paragraph 5.6, the letter from Michael Jones MP identified that the information that Clive just referred to wasn't actually available from software suppliers until 21st of August. So we've actually only had the last few weeks that we've been able to actually implement this scheme, hence it coming to Cabinet today, the first opportunity since then.
Roger?
Quick final question, Chairman. It's only occurred to me now, is that 1.3 million, have we received that money? Have we got interest from it? Can we add to that money from the interest that we received from it if we have that money in the bank already?
I would need to check whether I'll need to check whether we've actually received that funding. It comes to Section 31 grant. I need to see whether it's actually in the account at the moment. We're currently earning 0.54% on that at the moment. So there may be a few pounds on top of that.
Which roughly is about £60,000, I think, which is not an insignificant sum.
How many?
60,000. 1.3 million, 0.5%?
No.
1% of 1.3 is 130,000. Sorry, 13,000. 13,000.
Yeah, I was going to. Yeah, I think you need to do your percentages again. Yeah. But anyway, whatever extra money,
There's a few pounds extra.
we will give out in the grant system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
We'll
right.
try.
Okay. Right, so everyone happy with that report? Okay, thank you. Item 13, variation to West Mercia Energy Joint Agreement.
That's me.
Oh yes, sorry, yeah.
Fairly straightforward. There's been a change in legislation, so this is just to update the joint agreement that we have to allow West Mercia Energy to go after additional business in the utilities. The one thing I would like to highlight, though, following a visit by Councillor Macy and myself to West Mercia Energy, is what a very well-run and efficient company they are. I think anybody who's been involved in them, that's been down to see them, would appreciate what they do with a small workforce and what they actually return, as long as that continues. I move the recommendations.
Right. Any further comments? Right, thank you. Accept that one. Item 14, minimum income guarantee. Councillor Chapman, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. The paper here is before us today because the lateness of notification of the detail from central government meant that this couldn't be included in our fees and charges paper that was put through earlier in the year. The minimum income guarantee is the figure that describes how much money is left for a recipient of support from adult social care to pay their everyday living costs. The government hasn't increased the minimum income guarantee, which we've now been notified. and the amount that's allowed to be retained by someone who is in receipt of pension or pension guarantee is £189 for a single person per week and £144.30 for a couple. We're obliged under the regulations to set this as the minimum. In fact, our minimum income guarantee in Shropshire is already set at a higher level. Our level for a single person is £194.50 and for a couple £148.50. We're proposing therefore to keep the existing level, which is above the minimum set by the government, which will allow those pensioners and people in receipt of pension credit to retain around an extra £5 per week above the minimum set, and I propose recommendations at 2.1. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Roger. Thank you, Chairman. I listened to the BBC News today and also the iPaper, which is that as the front page, Britain's unfair economy, and it's the Archbishop of Canterbury making a political intervention about the gap between the well-off and the not well-off. And I noticed that the people doing it at present receive a change in income of £4.90, and what is being proposed by the Cabinet is to take £4.40 of that away from them to pay for it. So their income during July and August was up by £4.90 because this isn't backdated, and I'm glad to hear that. It only becomes effective when it's adopted. But the change, we are going to retain £4.40 of it, so they will, people entitled to this will in effect get 50p extra. Have I read that correct? Because I think that's diabolical.
I don't know the answer, but I'm sure somebody does.
You're absolutely correct, Roger, and that is the situation as it stands. What I can assure you is that we have not adopted and continue not to adopt the minimum level set by government, which would be considerably less than that. And I would also remind you in the papers that we detail the degree of pressure and the increasing costs this local authority faces in supporting those people. Our costs in terms of adult social care are going up at a rate of £8 million a year. This adjustment it accounts for £330,000, which annualised over the year will be the difference that it will make to our income, and I see no alternative but for us to take this step, and that's why it's being proposed here.
Quickly.
All right, thank you, Chairman. So, somebody who's in this, so for their August income, they'll have £277.45. In October, or whatever it is, that'll be reduced by £4.40. So we're taking money away from the less able, the disenfranchised, those who are really suffering and receiving in receipt of pension, attendance allowance, single person disability. We're taking £4.40 off them beginning in October.
Yes, I mean, I think Roger, what we should be clear about is that the full amount of that reduction would depend on the means test that they would go through as part of their contribution towards their adult social care costs. So they wouldn't automatically receive all of that reduction, because if they were only responsible for paying a proportion of their costs, say 25%, then it would only be 25% of that figure that came out. And also bear in mind that if their assets are below a minimum level, they'd be making no contribution at all to their adult social care costs, and the council will be carrying all of it. So don't assume from that that every single person who is in receipt of both a pension or pension credits would be making any contribution at all to their adult social care costs, because if their net assets are below £25,000, then the council would be covering all of their adult social care costs. So this isn't a blanket reduction that would apply to all of those, to all of the individuals that we're responsible for supporting.
Okay, right. Everyone happy with the paper? Right, thank you. And then we go on to exclusion of the public and press. I'm quite happy to move it.
Second.
Right, everyone in agreement? Yeah, so we're clear, yeah. Okay, right.